Welcome to toy-polloi. No Legos were harmed in the making of this video.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi. Now today we're going to take a look at restoring two outfits in one go, and that is the Action Man Space Ranger Patroller, which is the guy on the left, and the Zargonite on the right. Now the reason I'm doing sort of two in one is because they're essentially the same sort of outfits. They've got the same core bits, you know, helmet, gloves, boots, and then a jumpsuit with a sort of overlay tabard bit. So really it's essentially the same thing that needs doing on both of them, and it shouldn't be too much work. So first thing we're going to do is let's take a look at the main elements for these outfits and what we've got to do on them. So here are the two outfits. Now it's taken me quite a long time to collect the parts for these because these are both quite sought after costumes and you end up paying quite a lot of money for them. In fact, I'm still missing one piece for the Zargonite, but I'm hoping before I finish filming this video I'll actually come across it at a decent price, but if I don't then it will just have to wait for a future bit of a restoration. Now as I say, these outfits are essentially the same. You get a jumpsuit with each figure, which you can see here. This is the Space Ranger one. This one's a little bit on the filthy side and it suffers with sort of the very common problems of seams coming undone. There should be bits of elastic on the bottom here that hold the sort of legs into the boots, but you can see these have ripped or broken at some point, and some's actually replaced this one with a very old rubber band, so that needs repairing on both of these. A good clean really is the main thing that this suit needs. I think it's still got all of its press studs on the back, but so that's a fairly simple sort of bit to do. Again, the same thing on the Zargonite one. This actually doesn't look too bad, but it's missing the bits of elastic on the ankles again, and I think if we've got press studs, they have just about staying on there, so those will need sort of sewing back on. And with the Zargonite outfit there's also this band which I've shown you how to replace on other figures, so I'll show you again on this one even though this one has one. And then each figure comes with a pair of gloves and a pair of boots, and these are generally really quite filthy. These actually aren't too bad. Some of the boots that I put on this guy in the background are filthy, so those will need cleaning up as well. And each figure comes also with a helmet. Again, generally these are pretty dirty on the inside, just because they've been played with quite a lot, so I'm going to wash both of those really thoroughly. And on the Space Ranger we have the tabard, which is the sort of common problem area, because this is made out of a very thin sort of silvered material, and it has little numbers that you can stick on, and these are always stuck on in very strange places. In fact, if I show you a couple you'll see those are stuck on sort of differently on each one, so I'm going to make some replacement numbers. And they're generally missing the belt and holster, so you can see this one is missing a belt and holster, so I'll try and make some sort of replacement for that. You can see this still has the holster and belt on it. We can use that as a template. But I think the first thing we're going to do is give everything a thorough wash, because some of this stuff is really disgusting, like this one. It's very dirty, and I think just by washing it, it should come out pretty reasonable. There's even some stains on there. I think that's possibly some of the red that's come off of these tabards. But let's give everything a really good clean before we start, because it's always much nicer to do a restoration when everything's nice and fresh. So let's get this washed up in some hot soapy water. I'm going to use hot soapy water for everything. I'm going to use it to clean the fabric parts, and then I'm going to use a toothbrush to clean all of these bits and get in all the sort of nooks and crannies and make sure everything is lovely and clean, and then we can start putting the outfits back together. with the Space Ranger tabards, I'm not going to wash those in the warm soapy water because it's a fairly thin fabric. You can see here, and it's got printing all over one side, so I think washing it too hard might damage it any more than it is damaged already, because it's really just a sort of quite a thin material. So all I'm going to do is I've got a damp bit of kitchen towel here, and I'm just going to gently wipe over the surface, and that should remove any sort of bits of grime and dirt that we've got over the years, and shouldn't damage it any more than that, or shouldn't damage it at all really. It should just sort of gently clean it off. So let's just give these a little wipe down and see how they look. So I've got a few of these here. We're going to pick the best one when we come to put this figure together. You can see this one's actually a little bit more worn than the other. It's actually sort of starting to crack the print on it. So yeah, you want to be as careful and as gentle as possible when you clean these sorts of things. So just a wipe down with a damp cloth should do it. After giving everything a good wash, there are two items that still need a little bit of extra work, and it's these two boots. You can see this boot here has a red mark on the bottom of it that even with scrubbing and sort of really sort of rubbing with the toothbrush didn't seem to get rid of it. So I think for that one we're going to use a bit of kitchen towel and some lighter fluid. So I'm just going to put a little bit of lighter fluid on that, and we'll rub and see if that removes the mark, which of course it has. So there you go, that's that one all nice and clean now. And the other boot has some staining on it. You can see here that it's got a bit of a red stain. It looks like some ink has stained it, and the way we're going to fix that is to use some benzoyl peroxide spot cream. Now previously I've been using Oxy 10 spot cream because that's the main one that has benzoyl peroxide in it, but I bought some very cheap stuff off eBay recently. As you can see here, benzoyl peroxide gel 5%. I can't really read much what it says on there, but it's the same sort of spot cream stuff. Again, very cheap. So I'm just going to use that, squirt a little bit of it onto the little red areas, and then we'll leave that for a day or so, and that should have cleared up those little red marks. If it doesn't, then you just clean it off and reapply it, and we'll do it again a couple of times until it's all gone. But really, it shouldn't take that long to do because these aren't particularly bad stains. So there you go, a bit of benzoyl peroxide on those, and we'll leave that for a day or so and then clean it off, and it should all be back to white. So here are the two outfits after washing and drying. As you can see, they're already looking a lot better. There's still a few stains left on the Ranger one, but I think I'm just going to leave those because by the time we've got everything on, I don't think I'll actually notice them that much. You can see the red stain that was on the sort of left side there has come out quite a lot. There's a few little marks left, but overall that's a lot better. So the next thing I need to do on them is actually just fix the little bits of sewing. So on this one, it was the press stud on the back is coming loose. I'm just going to re-sew that on. It's also missing the two bits of elastic on the bottom, and this one needs the bits of elastic replacing. Now I've shown you how to do this before. You can buy flat elastic. I've actually just got some white stuff in because previously I'd only ever used black elastic, but the bottom of this jumpsuit needs white, so I've got some flat 3mm white elastic for that, and then I have some black elastic for the Zargonite jumpsuit because that one uses the black elastic. And then I'm going to just trim up a few bits as well because there's a few loose threads. You can see next to where everything is sort of coming out the bottom here, there's a few loose threads, so I'm just going to trim those off because again, these outfits look a lot better if you just tidy them up as you go along. I've also got a little problem with this Zargonite outfit, which is the elastic that goes around the wrist has sort of come apart really. It's all sort of fallen apart and perished. Now there's no way I'm going to be able to replace that elastic because it's actually a 3-colour elastic. It's got blue on one side, white in the middle, and then yellow on the other. So I'm just going to carefully trim that up so that it sort of has enough left that it still looks sort of reasonable. But anyway, this is going to be hidden inside a glove, so it shouldn't matter too much. But as you can see, unfortunately, it's sort of all come apart over the years. So let's get sewing and trimming, and we'll get these outfits ready to go back on the figures, and then we can work on the next part. after about 10 minutes of sewing, I've got these all done. You can see they've got the loops there on the bottom of the trouser legs. I've also reattached the little press stud there that was loose on the back, and same on the Space Ranger outfit there. Now with the Zargonite, he has an armband that goes around the left arm, and quite often these are missing. So what I've done is I've scanned in the skull and crossbones off the sort of tabard part of this outfit and recreated this little armband. And what you have to do is print that out onto some iron-on transfer paper, and then iron that onto a nice piece of cotton fabric, cut it out and sew it around, and you can just put it over the sleeve. If you want to see the full process for that, then check out my Space Ranger Talking Commander restoration, where I show you the entire process for making a replacement armband. But you'll end up with something that does look pretty good, and the file for that is available for free from toy-polloi.com. So we can get these jumpsuits put on the figures, and we'll move on to the next part of the restoration. Now we can move on to the tabard for the Space Ranger Patroller. Now the actual tabard parts are relatively easy to find, but they're generally always missing the belt, which is this part, which also has a little holster on it, and quite often they have the numbers put on in very sort of obscure places. Now the numbers are actually almost impossible to remove without damaging the tabard, so really you just have to live with this odd placement. As you can see on this one, I've got the number 1 stuck over it a few times. Sometimes you're lucky and the numbers are a little bit sort of loose, but as you can see here, I've tried to remove this one. It's removing the silver underneath, so really you do just have to live with it. But I have made a replacement set of these numbers if you want to add some back onto your figures. I'll put the file available on toy-polloi.com. You can just print that out onto, I would say, onto sticky backed glossy paper, and that should look pretty reasonable. But really you just have to put up with the sort of childhood placement of these stickers. And to be honest, I actually quite like the odd placement because it does sort of give it a little bit of history to it. But what we are going to do is to make a replacement belt, because really that is the most common thing that's missing. And to do that, I have bought some ribbon. Now you can see here, this is 1 centimetre thick ribbon, so it's quite sort of thin really in sort of regards to most ribbon, but it's the same thickness as the original belt here. You can see that lines up quite nicely, and this is in silver. It's a little bit on the light side, but I think it should work quite nicely. By the time it's all held in place, I think we'll get something that looks pretty reasonable. So what we've got to do is make first up the belt part of it, which is just a long strip of the ribbon, and we can measure it here. It's about just slightly over 17 centimetres. So I'm actually going to cut about 19 centimetres, because what I want to do with this ribbon is fold over the end, because the ribbon will fray quite quickly. So if I fold that over, and then I'm going to sew a press stud, which we have here, and I've shown you these before, these snap fasteners, onto each end, so that we end up with the exact same thing as the belt, and that should do a good enough job. So let's get one of those made. So first up, we need about 19 centimetres of this ribbon. So let's measure that out, and we'll get sewing. So with minimal sewing now, I've now got a belt with a couple of press studs on either end, and this does work very nicely, but obviously it's missing the holster, so we're going to make a very simple holster. Again, we're going to use the same ribbon. I've got about 10 centimetres of the ribbon. You can see they're measured on my board, and I'm going to fold this into a little loop, really. It's a sort of over and over loop, like a little ribbon bow, like you can see, like that, and that will make us a little hoop that the gun can sort of hold into. You can see there, should work quite nicely. And again, to make this look sort of neat, I'm going to fold over these ends just sort of behind and do the same like that, so it all looks like quite a nice neat little loop. And then I'm going to sew that into the middle of the belt on one side, so about sort of there, and that should work perfectly well as a holster. So let's get this sewed in place. So there you go, with a minimal amount of sewing. I've now got a loop on one side of the belt, and that should be enough to hold the gun if I sort of drop that in place, get it over the main sort of part, and you can see that will look quite nice on the side of the figure. It's obviously not a perfect match for the original one, but it will do the job until I find a replacement. But so you can see, with a little bit of ribbon and a couple of press studs, you can make a very good replacement belt. So let's actually slot this into one of these tabards that I have here, and we'll see what it looks like, see what the colour match is like. So there's a couple of little holes on either side, just slot that through. That's actually not a bad colour match. You can see the silver sort of shines quite nicely with the original tabard. So I'm going to get these put on the figures, and we'll take a look at how they look once they're sort of all in place. So here with the belt and holster I've just made using some ribbon. As you can see, it actually works quite nicely. The gun is held pretty sturdily on the side, and the belt doesn't look too out of place. It's a little bit shinier and lighter than the original grey of the tabard, but I'm sure maybe with a bit more searching I could find a slightly darker bit of ribbon. But the actual sort of process and the idea behind it works really well. So I'm really happy with how that's come out. After a couple of treatments using the benzoyl peroxide, you can see that the red marks that were at the top of the boot have now gone. So this is looking pretty clean and can go back on the figure. And here are the two figures with the uniforms all put back in place. And as you can see, they do actually look pretty good. Sadly, I didn't manage to find the white belt for the Zargonite. I've been hunting high and low, and I was even bidding on one on eBay, but it went way past the price I'm happy to pay for it. So at some point in the future, I hope to find one of those. But for now, he's going to go on display here without the white belt, which still looks pretty good. But, you know, if you want to complete it, then the white belt is something that you do need to find. And also the Space Ranger, his uniform is still a little bit sort of on the dirty and tatty side. So again, I hope to find a spare jumpsuit at some point, and those do come up fairly regularly. So the next one I see, I'll grab and I'll just swap that out. But even in the state they are, they look fantastic, and they will certainly go on display here and look really nice with the rest of my Action Man collection. I'd also like to say a quick thank you to Roy Wolford, who very kindly sent me a box of Action Man bits, and the Action Man that he sent is actually the guy inside this Zargonite uniform. So big thanks to Roy, and you can watch a brief little bit of the unboxing after the end of this video. So I hope this video has been of interest to you, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.